to the Web3 Prof Podcast.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Richard Chan, who is a founder of Manifold. Thanks for being with me here today.
Yeah, good to be here.
All right. So, Richard, I'd love to hear a little bit about your kind of Web3 story. How did you get into the world of Web3 and most specifically into NFTs? Because that's really what you're known for.
Yeah. I think my story starts back in probably 2012 when I got into crypto in general, right? So back then it used to be called Bitcoin. Crypto was a thing. There's only one crypto, which is Bitcoin. Started making some Bitcoin apps back then. Ended up, finding some success there. And then, really, I would say after that was the crypto wave where, you had Ethereum and you had all these other chains coming in. I didn't really play around in that era of things, right? And so we had all those like ICO coins and stuff going out. That was around 2017-ish. Pretty much sat that one out. But then in 2021, so January 2021, it's just kind of like post-pandemic or like, I guess near the tail end of the pandemic, right? Yeah. My current co-founder, he was in Mexico and he started like exploring the blockchain, just seeing what people were doing. And he saw people were doing like minting NFTs. And he's like, what are NFTs? And so then he started buying them and he sent one to me. And I looked at it and I was like, what is this? Right? It's funny because I've been in crypto before, but this is just a completely foreign concept to me.
And NFTs at that point had been around for maybe 4 years?
Yeah, 4 years, right? No real mainstream adoption of it, but they were a thing, right? Actually, there's another funny story before that. I can get that in a second, but so he sent me this NFT and he had just bought, and he paid I think $1,000 for it, and I was just like,
"You're crazy."
Did you buy? No, I didn't think it was crazy. I was just like, "What did you buy?" Right? And I was like, "Okay, he bought a picture, but what does it mean to buy a picture?" Right? It was just a complete foreign concept, right? So I was like, "Cool," right? Then he sent me another one a week later. He bought this for like $1,500, and I was like, cool, right? Still intrigued, but not quite getting it. And then a week later, he's like, hey, can you help me buy one of these things? And I was like, sure, I'll help you. I'll help you out.
Like financially?
No, like actually, like sit there and on a computer and buy it, right? So like the reason why he needed help was that the website Nifty Gateway there were 16 101s. And the way you get one was you had to be the first person to click the button.
Right.
So it was really, everyone just like at 4 p.m., everyone in the world who's trying to get one of these things would go on the website and click the button. And your goal was to be the very first person to do so. And, that's a very, like when you think about it, that's like a crazy kind of thing, right? It's like you're competing against the world to like hit a button just to like buy something, right? It's happened before, but this was like, this is a big event, right? And I was like, sure, I'll help you buy one of these things. So, he wanted me to use me as just another shot at buying one of these things.
So you were just going to sit there and just press buy.
Yeah.
You weren't like building a bot or something.
No.
Okay.
Well, we did build a bot.
Okay.
Right? So we were on this website. I'm like, what do you do? He's like, click the button, right? I'm like, at 4 p.m. He's like, yeah. And I was like, this is like ridiculous. Right? We're all programmers. So he's a programmer, I'm a programmer.
Yeah.
And so I started inspecting the website and I was like, oh, you can programmatically like get past the button, just disable it, right? So we got to the next button, we got to the buy page, and then there's another button to click. And then we're like, okay, click that button. And it didn't work because it's behind a web request. And then as we were on there, we said, oh, we can just take that web request and just like build a bot. So we ended up building a bot, like quick 5-minute bot job. All it did was keep trying to write the request over and over again. 4 p.m. hits, everything goes, and all my screen was like sold out. And I was like, okay, well, like that was fast. Obviously it's instant sell out for everything. And like, oh, like tough luck, we didn't get one. But then like maybe 2-3 minutes later, I get an email saying I'd purchased one.
Right.
So one of my bots had actually like gone through, and I was like, okay, cool, we got one, right? So now what? He's like, oh, you only have 3 options. You can buy it, or you can sell it, you can transfer it, or you can hold it. And he's like, selling is probably the most interesting thing to do, right? So we bought this thing for $4,000, and I had no idea how to price these things. I'm like, okay, like $4,000 is a lot of, I consider it quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
And he's like, let's sell it for $15,000. And I was just like, are you serious? Like, who's gonna buy it for $15,000, right? Like who, right? Anyways. He's like, you're gonna be mad if you make $11,000 for like, I don't know, like 20 minutes worth of just sitting here.
Right.
I'm like, well, no, right? How can you be mad about that? So anyways, we listed it for sale. we caught up because I haven't actually talked for like, a while because of the pandemic. After we hung up, 10 minutes later, I get an email saying it's sold. And my heart was just like, my heart sank, right? Because I was like, first of all, it's like confusion of like, what just happened here.
Right.
But also just like, I was like shit, we sold it too low.
Yeah, you should have charged more.
Right. That was my first thing, right? I was like, if someone bought it that fast, that means you didn't like price it right.
Yeah.
That, someone just like snapped it up, right? And so I was like, okay, what just happened there, right? And there's another kind of interesting emotion there. It was it was like loss, right? So I had something that was really cool, and all of a sudden I didn't have it now.
Mm-hmm. And
to me, I was like, whoa, that's like it's a very powerful emotion, right? Because a lot of behaviors are, based in emotions. And as someone who'd been in crypto for a while, this was like the killer application. I saw it right there. I was like, oh, this is the thing that is going to make like consumers care about things.
Right.
Like, before it was all about financial transactions, all about moving money back and forth. But now I was like, this is like a consumer application that actually makes sense for crypto. Right. And at that point now it's like, okay, like I needed to understand what was going on there. And so obviously first thing is how do you do that again? Right. So started, analyzing the market, made my bot better, all these sort of things, more sophistication. But really started scraping the data from the blockchain and, all these marketplaces, just trying to figure out, what was going on. I started off as a collector at first, and I built tools to give myself a leg up over pretty much all the information there because, no one really had any tools back then. And then started just collecting art just to understand, what was actually going on in the space. So as we started collecting art, anyways, that's my NFT story.
Yeah.
So that's how we got started. It was at that point, it was just like all consuming.
And so what was it? Was it the emotion around, because you kind of said you felt like a sense of loss when you sold that first NFT. So I guess it was quite compelling to you from an emotional perspective where maybe buying Bitcoin or trading Bitcoin didn't have that same type of excitement. Am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, well, when you think about like, I guess like the whole thing about like financials and like making money, so that it's like you get this like dopamine rush when you're making money, right?
Yeah.
When you lose money, it's like same thing. You get like, this feeling of like loss.
Yeah.
But, in this case here, it wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. And so, NFTs are a very interesting thing because what it does, it's like, what does an NFT actually do from under hood, right? It's really a technology that allows you to sign like ownership of something. It's like, it just says I own something on the blockchain. But it's a very abstract concept because you can say I own anything, right? In this case here, we're saying you own like digital assets.
Yeah. And
the properties that the blockchain, enable is that they make a digital object able to have the properties of a physical object, right? And that's never been done before.
Right.
Like when you have these artists out there or anyone making an NFT, if you create a file, right, someone could just take that file, copy the file, and you can't really tell. You don't own the file. It's just like you have copies of the file.
Right.
But for the first time, you can actually say, I own something that, doesn't tangibly exist.
Yeah.
You can own concepts, you can own artwork, you can own ideas, right? And, there's a record on the blockchain that says this thing exists and can be transferred, traded, sold, bought, and so on.
So when you first started doing this, did you realize the opportunity in front of you? Or how long was it down the journey where you thought, oh, this is a business. I want to build a company around this idea?
Yeah, so it's funny because like we never set out to build a company. Like building a company was not like one of the things that we set out to do. It was more just trying to understand it first. Like the reason why we created the company was we realized that we had something to offer that no one else could, right? And so part of the Manifold story was that we started collecting artworks from artists and started talking to them. And when you talk to all these artists, you realize just how much their lives had changed just because of through NFTs. For the first time, these digital artists used to work for corporations, doing client work, working pretty much like paycheck to paycheck, had the ability to really just create what they really wanted to, right? And it made digital art kind of be on par with like physical art. A ton of work goes into creating digital art, but it wasn't recognized as a true valuable art form. And so all of a sudden you had all these artists, all these digital creators, being able to make their livings selling artwork, right? Like following their passion and, being fueled by creativity itself. And so, in their own right, they're pretty much their own entrepreneurs. Yeah. Right. That, all of a sudden had the medium to like actually, make a living off of. And when you talk to these artists, they're like, yeah, this is amazing, right? But none of them actually truly knew what they were doing. They're like, they saw NFTs as a way to sell things.
Right.
Coming from a blockchain background, and, my co-founders from a gaming background, we saw ourselves as, the forefront of digital creation. And, understanding the blockchain and so on, it's like, a lot of people think of NFTs as, images and video, right? Pretty much a JPEG. But, if you combine the aspects of the blockchain, it's just so much more. It's a brand new medium of expression. And, we started working with some of these artists on some of these projects and pretty much just unlocking that potential.
Right.
And that's kind of like how Manifold started, right? And so one of our very first collaborations was with an artist called Mad Dog Jones. And we created a NFT called The Replicator. The Replicator was an NFT. It's a conceptual artwork. It's an image of a photocopier, and every month it would make a copy of itself. In some cases, it would make, a second generation. In some cases, it would jam. But it had this like probabilistic model built into it for what the NFT was going to end up, all the NFTs that this thing would create would eventually end up being. And so, this sold for $4.2 million at Philips. And yeah. And so, but the interesting thing is that this is the very first time major artwork had sold on its own smart contract. And so, there was a whole like Beeple thing for $69 million.
Yeah.
That was on a shared contract, right? And pretty much all the other notable artworks had been on shared contracts before that.
Okay. And
so like this is the first time that's, a brand new concept that needed to, the replicator could only exist as an artwork, as an NFT. And, that's like, I was very powerful because it's like, we're now trying to show the power of what the technology is and not just so much, it's not just a medium for like sales.
Can you explain how like the Beeple sale differed from what you did with Mad Dog Jones as far as the smart contract goes? Can you break that down?
Yeah. So the Beeple sale was sold on a Maker's Place contract, and Maker's Place is another NFT marketplace. And the difference is that pretty much everything sold on the Maker's Place platform gets sold off of one smart contract. And so what that means is that you could have a piece like Beeple's, beautiful piece being sold next to a picture of a frog, right? On the same smart contract. If you wanted to determine the provenance of the piece, so provenance is the big thing in art.
Yeah.
And it's a multi-step process. So first of all, you have to take a look at the token and to verify, is this the token that I expected it's going to be? And then you have to go to the marketplace itself and verify that that marketplace is authentic. And then on the marketplace, you have to verify that that account is authentic. And so there's a multi-step process of verifying that something is truly authentic. But there's a few issues with that. One is, what if this marketplace were to disappear tomorrow, right? And that record of, let's say, provenance disappears, if that link disappears, right? You have, you can think of, what is a forensic blockchain science or a blockchain forensic person or art historian in the future going to look back on, in the future? They're going to use the blockchain to look for information to find, is this the actual Beeple piece?
Yeah.
And, if that one source of truth, which is the marketplace, disappears on that platform contract, then it just makes the, the value of the token like less because, you have to, go look back on it.
Yeah.
And so the thing with the Mad Dog Jones replicator is that the contract itself was, when it was deployed by Mad Dog Jones, right? And so his fingerprints of him it's all over it. It's like, it's like saying, this NFT is created within his own workshop rather than going to like the Walmart photo lab to like get something printed.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about why someone would want to use Manifold? What is unique about Manifold versus maybe your competition?
So the big thing that Manifold is known for originally was that we offered sovereign smart contracts, right? So they were sovereign to the creator. So that means that no one could take that away from you. And so if you were to deploy a contract, you would be the sole owner of that contract. We don't have any ability to change the limitation under you. It is completely yours, right? And so, it's not a platform contract. And, that was like that's like one of the key components of like, being sovereign in Web3. And so like, Nick, that's something that no one can take away from you. It's also interoperable with every other marketplace out there, right? So, as an example, there are some other marketplaces like OpenSea, right? Some artists have minted artworks on OpenSea. on their platform contract. And one day, OpenSea got a letter from the government says that you can't do any business with Iranian companies.
Yeah.
Right? So what they did was they took all IPs that connected to OpenSea that were from Iran.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at all of the works that were created on it, and they pretty much deplatformed them.
Wow.
Even if they had been sold to collectors.
Right.
Right. And so all of a sudden that token doesn't exist anymore. And so, in that case here, because of, political reasons or, a lot of artists had been deplatformed and collectors lost value.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have your own smart contract, no one can do that to you.
Yeah.
You have full control over the works minted on it. Not even Manifold. As Manifold itself, we can't take that away from you. It's like completely in your control.
And is this always on Ethereum, or is this blockchain agnostic?
Right now we're on Ethereum. We have plans to kind of expand to other blockchains, but primarily a lot of our community is on Ethereum.
So let me ask you a personal question.
Sure.
What's with the glasses?
The glasses? So the glasses are part of my crypto identity, right?
And so where did that start?
Yeah. So So they started when I bought a CryptoPunk, right?
Which was how long ago?
2000. It was 3 months I started on NFTs. So March of 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I know as I was looking at NFTs, this is kind of before the whole profile pic craze, right?
Mm-hmm.
But CryptoPunks were CryptoPunks are considered one of the original NFT collections, right?
Yeah.
Probably the Genesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what they are, there's these pixelated avatars, and they all have different traits, and so they're kind of considered historical NFTs. There's 10,000 of them. They were released all for free. People claim them, and all of a sudden they became valuable because of the community, right?
Yes.
And so I at the time, right, they were seen as kind of a status symbol in the crypto community, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why was that if you had a CryptoPunk, you were seen as someone who was a big believer in the space because you're an OG, or you had spent a lot of money to buy one.
One of the two, right?
Yeah, one of the two, right? So also believer because you're willing to put skin in the game like that.
Yeah.
So I bought my CryptoPunk and then I changed my profile to it. And part of my CryptoPunk is that they have 3D glasses. And part of the reason why I bought my CryptoPunk is I thought it looked like me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So did you buy it because you thought, oh, this is really great branding? I'm going to become this character in the crypto world? Because it is brilliant. Because every time I've seen you, and any pictures I find of you online, you're wearing your glasses, and it's often tied to your CryptoPunk, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant marketing.
Yeah, I think that's part. That was an intended side effect at first.
Okay.
Right, but as when I got my CryptoPunk, I'm like, oh, these are cool. I should start wearing 3D glasses, right? And then I started buying 3D glasses NFTs. I became known as this 3D glasses connoisseur.
Yeah.
And I just started wearing 3D glasses to Zoom calls and meetings and taking them. And then I just became known as, the guy who wears 3D glasses.
So outside of crypto conversations, are you wearing your 3D glasses?
Sometimes.
Oh, really? So if I see you walking around Vancouver, it's possible
Sometimes I will. Sometimes I will. I'll wear them for fun just because they're fun.
Do people stop you? Do people what's going on?
They don't really stop me, except they're a crypto person. Though. It's really funny because it's I'm like Superman. If I put my glasses on, people are like, oh, it's Richard. But if I don't, then people just ignore me.
They're like, just another random guy walking around the street.
Especially at NFT conferences and so on, people will come up and be like, oh, it's Richard. Can I take a photo with you?
Yeah.
So, you're right. It's just really great branding.
Yeah. So you have quite a substantial following on Twitter.
Yeah.
A couple 100,000 followers. How did you build that? And what was kind of the, was this pre-crypto that you had a big following, or is it because of your punk and your identity here? How did that happen?
No, it's all because of crypto.
Yeah.
So, I used to be on Twitter quite a bit just because I worked at Hootsuite.
Yeah.
And, was just testing my app every day, right? But it was more just a social thing. When I got into crypto, I started off as a collector and started, Twitter was where the community was. Mm-hmm. And really, it's just, I spent my time just building up my following, right? My whole thing was about building community, helping as many people as possible. And really, having Manifold as a platform is a great avenue for that.
Yeah.
But, it's really just been a byproduct of me just trying to be helpful for the general broader crypto community.
That's great. So where do you think we are today in NFTs? We've kind of seen some controversial things happen. One of them I'd like to hear your comment on is the relationship between NFTs and royalties. Some platforms are not enforcing royalties anymore. Some are. This is kind of, maybe over the last few months, this has become kind of a big controversy. What are your thoughts on NFTs and royalties?
Well, I think that, so a lot of creators came into this space thinking that royalties were given, right? They're like, oh, you should start selling your work in it on, you should join the crypto space and sell NFTs because you will make residuals from any sort of sale going forward, right? Yeah. That, I don't think many people understood what was actually going on because, royalties were never a given. They were kind of it was a social construct, right? And it was kind of a nice thing. And it was kind of like I would say it was created because people thought it was the right thing to do, right? They saw what happened in the traditional art world and said royalties are a good thing for creators because it gives them longevity in the space, right? And all the marketplaces had said, yeah, we believe this is a good thing. And so they all supported it, right? And so the actual support for the royalties it's always down to the marketplace, the person selling, the platform selling the assets themselves.
Yeah.
And so along came, a few marketplaces and said, hey, we're just going to ignore royalties in order to undercut our competitors because now our prices are cheaper. Was
Magic Eden the first one?
There was a few of them. I think there was like Magic Eden. There was Blur. I think people were using SudoSwap quite a bit.
Okay.
I think SudoSwap is the original one, right?
Okay.
They're and X2Y2. But yeah, so they started slowly eroding the idea of royalties, right? Just because there was margin to be had there. That collectors who don't care about royalties, all they care about is value, would end up using these platforms as part of that proposition. And so, what happened is all of a sudden OpenSea, which is the biggest marketplace out there, saw that they were losing market share to all these other royalties or all these other platforms, zero royalty platforms, and they came in and said, okay, we're gonna put a solution in that you can only sell in OpenSea and get royalties if you block those marketplaces.
Right.
And so obviously this opened up a can of worms for everyone because it's like, what does it mean for OpenSea to like come up with this stance? A lot of contracts out there or a lot of artists out there who were depending on royalties all of a sudden didn't have access to royalties anymore. It's kind of like a very fast change for OpenSea. And so, it kind of flipped the whole community on its head to be like, okay, it created a big divide, I would say,
Yeah.
My stance is that, I think royalties are a good thing. You should pay royalties if you want to support art, if you support the arts and the artists themselves. But, I think that what it's really going to do is it's going to force creators and platforms and projects to really think about the business models of how they do things in Web3. Yeah. Before, the business model was we're going to make money off royalties. Yeah. That's no longer the case. I think it's a stopgap right now. Where we're at right now, but I think that royalties will eventually be diminished over time just because they're not enforceable. Yeah. It's not built into the protocol level, and at the end of the day, competition will kind of erode those because as technology gets more sophisticated, you're just going to see more competition. So
can you explain how they're not enforceable? Why that is the case? Because I think when you're early on in NFT, in the NFT world, this is like the big thing. Artists can make money off of royalties and nobody can do anything about it. And then it comes down to it. That's actually not true at all. Yeah. That was totally false.
So if you think about what it means to be enforceable, that means that whenever I transact an NFT, I would have to pay the original creator or whatever, a specified person, a percentage of that, right? Or some fee for doing so. So what that means is that when I think about the actual sale itself, that means that every single transaction has to have a fee attached to it. But what happens if I want to just transfer an NFT to myself? Yeah. I have one wallet, I'm transferring to my other wallet. Yeah. Does that mean I have to pay a fee to the creator for doing so? Right. And so there's nothing baked into the spec to distinguish between a transfer and a sale.
Right. Does not, though, the sale going through a marketplace create security for the buyer? If I'm going to transfer, let's say I want to get around royalties, so I'm going to transfer it to you. I believe I'm in a position where you may not send me the crypto or I may not send you the NFT, where the marketplace kind of gives us that guarantee of security. Yeah. So if the marketplace enforces royalties because it's a safer place for us to trade, are we not then almost that royalty is almost like a security fee or a way for us to safely transfer? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, would you rather choose, okay, so if you were to transfer to me and I said, hey, you can transfer to me safely on this marketplace, but you're going to have to pay for it.
Right.
You're going to have to pay additional fee to the marketplace and to the creator to do so.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, there's a zero fee, zero royalty marketplace. Which one would you choose?
I guess the problem is in this situation is that some marketplaces went to zero fees.
Yep.
If they would have all held their ground, nobody would have stepped back in this place. Yep. But once whoever the first one was, they then, everybody, because money obviously flows to the place of least resistance, and that's what happened in that case. Eh?
Yep.
So do you see OpenSea continually taking this stance? Or do you think they're going to draw down their business so substantially that they're really going to have to go to not enforcing royalties?
I think the problem with OpenSea is that OpenSea is like Craigslist. They handle everything. Right. But the thing is, like, NFTs are very dynamic, right? Mm-hmm. There's many different use cases for NFTs, right? Yeah. So the big trading volume right now is happening for the class of NFTs that I call PFPs, or people call PFPs, which is profile pictures. Mm-hmm. And so these all have highly volatile, or not highly, but high volume trading activity going on. The reason being is that a lot of people are speculating on them. They're seen as it's like a game, sort of. Yeah. On the other hand, you have we'll say art NFTs. These NFTs aren't traded as frequently. They're more creator focused. And then you have things like utility NFTs, right, which have no kind of trading value at all, but can still, the value is in not the NFT itself, but it's what you can do with the NFTs. Yeah. And so they're wildly very different things. And so we think of OpenSea is trying to design a product that caters to every single type of NFT. It's like the jack of all trades. But when you think about some of these platforms and why they're succeeding, why they're going to take market share away from OpenSea, is because they're designed for traders. Right. And so, OpenSea is put in a really tough decision right now because they have to make a decision of, how to make policies that work for every single type of NFT. Mm. And, I think that's the hard part, is that it's kind of hard to, right? Right. You got to start specializing because, it's like, Airbnb took away market share from Craigslist because they specialized and made a better experience for that. Yeah. And so in this case here, some of these other platforms are making better experiences for different types of NFTs that are being traded. Right. And so when we talk about different NFTs, can you explain to us NFTs beyond art? And every time I've had anyone who's an expert in NFTs here on the podcast, I've always asked this question. So where do you see us going beyond kind of the PFP thing? What does the next, 3 to 5 years look like for NFTs, which I know in the world of Web3 is a long time? Yeah. So the thing is, if you think about what NFTs can do, like beyond art itself, right? They're pretty much programmatic pieces of information that's on the blockchain. And you can actually have like state attached to the NFTs itself. And, it's up to people's imaginations for like what they want to do with NFTs, right? But as I mentioned earlier, the idea, to me, the core concept of NFTs is just ownership. Mm-hmm. And what you do with that ownership is completely up to whoever is creating or collecting these NFTs themselves. Right. And, for example, you could be like, hey, this NFT represents ownership of a house. Yeah. Right. So you could do that if you really want to. If you just if you set the legal agreements for doing so, you could actually make it tied to that. Right. Other things are like, memberships, right? I want to be part of a membership or a fan club, and I want that record of me being a member to be on the blockchain, right?
Why is that important? Like, why can't I just trust the membership, the company that I'm a member of? Like, if I'm a member of Starbucks loyalty program, why do I need like my membership to be on the blockchain? Can't I just trust Starbucks to keep track of that for me?
Well, it depends on what the platform is using in those cases, right? So let's take an example of, okay, so let's take it the other way around. Why would you want a membership? If you were one of these brands, why would you want to create a membership program? Okay. Right. And so let's just say, this is a very common use case. Let's just say you're an artist. And so, we work with a bunch of artists very closely. A lot of these artists have to use other platforms to run their membership programs, right? So there's a lot of few commons. There's a lot of them out there. But let's just say, a common one was like Facebook pages. Mm-hmm. And so as an artist, I would build up my fan engagement. I'd build up everything on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden one day Facebook is like, no, you got to start paying me for it. Right. We're going to change the algorithm. Unless you pay to access your audience that you built on our platform, you have to follow our rules. Yeah. All of a sudden they're like, well, that sucks. Right. Well, I'll pay it. Right. Because I want to access my audience. Right. So what NFTs do is that they actually let the artist have a direct-to-consumer relationship. And so what they can do now is that if you have one of my NFTs, hey, our content is on is on Facebook, right, or whatever platform, if you have an NFT, you have access to the benefits on that platform. It also lets them have like a portable membership program, because now I can say, oh, here's the other cool platform that offers these benefits. If you have one of my NFTs, you can go over there now.
Yeah.
Right. So before everything was platform centric. So the platform owned the content, they own the users, and now it's creator centric. So the creators now own the platform and their users.
So how did your experience working maybe for a brand like Hootsuite, which is a social media dashboard that highly depends on centralized companies like Facebook and companies like that. And how did your experience working with these centralized organizations impact the value that you put on the example you just gave, where the creators kind of have control rather than the centralized organizations?
Well, it's an interesting thing about Hootsuite is that, Hootsuite was dependent on Twitter as a platform.
Right.
And I actually remember like back then, when Twitter had their open API, they were like, okay, everything's open, right? You have free access to everything. And then all of a sudden they closed it off, right? You had to their fire hose closed because they were like, oh, we're taking it in-house now.
Yeah.
Which greatly impacted like Hootsuite's, I guess that's a core business, I would say. But it's kind of like saying that, like, what if Twitter was a protocol? Like, what if it wasn't like a paid service that was dependent on ads and advertising? What if it was just a protocol for publishing information that anybody can then access and get access and build, their own platform on top of that? That's sort of like what I see, like, what NFTs are able to do.
Yeah.
It's like, you can have your protocol, which is the NFTs that you're issuing, and then you can build platforms on top of those.
Mm. So do you see NFTs disrupting social media? I hear of things like Lens Protocol, things like that, where we move into decentralized social media, which I think, heavily depend on kind of NFTs to maybe hold your username or things like that. Where do you see that going? Well,
I always look to the today's youth, right? And so if you think about what, the next generation are doing, they're playing Roblox, they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Minecraft.
You just described my children.
Yeah, right. So exactly right. And so, what are they doing on these things? They're buying goods, they're buying digital goods, right? They have their identities on there, they have their profiles, they have their avatars, right? And these are all billion-dollar companies in their own right. And so when this generation grows up, they're going to be digitally native, or I would say like Web3 native pretty much.
Yeah.
So the concepts that they're playing with right now, they're going to grow up and be like, oh, NFTs are just the adult version of this, right?
Right.
It's a natural extension. And so you can actually see, why that matters, because all of a sudden you can have, profiles that you can create in one platform and move them over to another platform. You can have objects that follow you, across your history of, things.
So I just want to ask a question there. So I hear about this a lot from Web3 people, this idea of composability, where you can take your thing and move it to somewhere else. I'm unaware of that existing anywhere. Does it currently happen, or is this still this is what Web3 will become? I can take my asset on this video game and take it over to this video game that's operated by a different company.
So it's not there yet. I think we're still in the Wild West, right? Everyone is trying to compete. Everyone is trying to build the best standard, and really, I think that's the problem. We have no real standards for composability on that nature.
When you say standard, do you mean like ERC 721? Like, are you talking about that type of standard, or are you talking about just like there's just no standards for how businesses should operate in this place?
Yeah, like standards for making things composable, right?
Okay.
So ERC 721 is a standard, but it's a generic standard for just how do you mint NFTs.
Yeah.
But if you want to have a composable thing that, would be like, hey, this is my hat I wear in a game, right? You have to have a standard for what that hat looks like so that other platforms can, ingest that information.
Yeah.
We have it for like art. For example, if it's just an image and a video, I can be like, okay, I have an NFT that represents an image and a video. I can take it to one of these metaverse worlds and be like, okay, display this image here.
Yeah.
Right. So it's composable and compatible for that.
Okay.
But for other types of content, it's not there yet.
Is that really important for the success of Web3, this idea of composability?
I would say, I think it's half-half, right? I think that standards are good. It's kind of like, we have HTTP as a standard, right? Everyone agrees upon that's a good standard. It was created a long time ago, but, we're going to have to find standards for us to have a proliferation of, digital goods. Do
you see any companies that you're aware of that you think are leading in this area? Who's going to be the first to come up with something like this? What do you think?
I'm actually not sure.
Come on.
There's lots of people doing it right now. I mean, there's like, when you think about I think it depends on where you think it's going to go, right?
Okay.
Like, for example, like metaverses.
Yeah.
There's probably about, I'd say 100 metaverse companies out there all trying to build their own metaverses, but I would say, I think it takes a critical mass to get there.
Yeah.
And, I think I really think the big unlock is that Web3 isn't accessible to the masses right now.
Yeah.
Like there is a missing piece of infrastructure and tooling that makes it easy for someone who, doesn't have to understand what a wallet is, how to set up their keys, how to, self-custody everything, to make that leap. And so until those tools have been kind of evolved to a point where it actually is easy to do and safe to do so, I think that's the current level of things that need to be built within the ecosystem.
So how important is self-custody? Because I think that's a confusing thing for nearly anybody who gets into the space. How important is self-custody versus just kind of creating, like some kind of wallet where some centralized company kind of holds your keys and it just makes it simpler for us? Like, is there a Web 2.5 step in here that we can get to?
Yeah. I mean, self-custody is probably the most important thing, when you think about crypto in general.
It's like the basis of the value system.
The base value, right? So it's like, they say, not your keys, not your crypto is what they say, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen that, you saw FTX recently, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people had money on FTX. All of a sudden, it's gone, right? They didn't actually have custody of it. FTX did. And so, there are tons of solutions out there that, can accomplish this. Like, for example, what if your identity was a smart contract that, had a key? What if your wallet was a smart contract that a platform had a key to, but when you also had a key to, but then when you're ready to self-custody, you just cut them off.
Okay.
Right. So that's an example of a really simple solution for how that could work.
And is that kind of stuff, are people building those types of solutions right now?
I don't know what anyone is.
Well, it feels like you just started a company.
Yeah. Well, I'm there's different mechanisms out there, but, I don't know anyone specifically building that style of wallet identities and so on.
Yeah. So the user experience for the kind of everyday person who wants to get into Web3 is really challenging right now. Yeah. And I think, when I'm teaching my students, we spend a lot of time just dealing with the idea of a seed phrase and how you shouldn't save it on your computer and how do you log into that wallet and download that extension, and then you got your ledger and you got all this kind of stuff, and it's like, wow, this is at some point you're like, you know what, maybe I should just not do this.
Yeah. Because
this is really confusing and I'm worried that I'm going to lose this little piece of paper that's holding my Bitcoin or whatever it is. So, when do you think we're going to get to a place where we're like, okay, normal people can get into this and it's reasonable for them? Are we years away, months away?
Probably years.
Okay.
I think we're probably 5 years away.
Okay. We got a bit of work to do.
I think to me, the interesting thing is that, given this last bull run, I was just, what happened is that there was a lot of investment that went into the space. And so there's a lot of teams working on solutions right now that, it takes years for, technology to, mature enough. Like even Manifold, right? We've been building Manifold for 2 years. We're not even at a state of maturity yet.
Right.
OpenSea was around for 5 years before, to this date, right? So it's they've been building for a while. And so, I think any sort of, I guess technological innovation takes about, I'd say 3 to 5 years to come to fruition.
Yeah. Do you believe that everybody in the world, or maybe everyone who has a device, is going to own an NFT in the next 5 or 10 years?
I can see it. Yeah.
And in what case would that be? Would that be through tickets? Would that be through memberships? Would that be through gaming? Where do you see, or is it all of these things? Where do you see this type of stuff happening?
I think it's all over the place, right? I think most people will interact with NFTs without even knowing they're interacting with NFTs.
Right.
For example, I heard that Xbox rewards are actually built on a blockchain behind the scenes.
Okay.
Right. So they're technically NFTs because,
Interesting.
there's a record of how they got them and how they get transferred around. But it's behind the scenes, it's going to happen.
Sure. So you may not know, my mom may not know that the ticket to the concert that she has is an NFT, but it may be actually an NFT.
Yeah. Or even let's just say crypto. You're probably using crypto right now without even knowing. Through your financial systems.
Okay.
Right. So, a lot of banks and credit card companies will actually use crypto to do settlements.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Are you involved in the cryptocurrency space? Do you buy and sell crypto? Do you hold crypto? Where are you at with that?
I'm pretty much just all in NFTs at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why is that?
Just no time.
It's really?
Yeah.
But wouldn't you, if you really saw value in Bitcoin or altcoins, would you not make the time? Is it because you don't really see the value and you see more value in NFTs?
I think that to me, the NFTs is the growing segment right now.
Okay.
Right. And, when you think about like Bitcoin, like what are you going to do in Bitcoin? The only thing you can do is just like buy and sell.
Right.
Right. And so, I think as crypto as just more long term.
Okay.
Right. You can't actually like build stuff in the Bitcoin community. Right. It's like really hard to because people have said this is what Bitcoin is and we don't want to change it. Bitcoin maxis, right? Yeah. Which I appreciate, but then it's like as someone who's a builder and able to actually like build like things, right? The fun, for me, the fun part is in Ethereum right now.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on like Magic Eden, Solana, and the Solana ecosystem when it comes to NFTs? Because we see a fair bit of transactions happening in that space. But it seems like, everybody's always on about Ethereum and Ethereum and Ethereum. But when you look at the numbers, it seems like Solana does extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think the thing about Solana is that Solana isn't truly decentralized. Mm-hmm. It's more of a centralized system. Mm-hmm. And so it's really just like a vote of like, do you believe in a centralized ecosystem or a decentralized ecosystem?
Right.
And so, for us, we said that, we believe decentralized is the way. And so that's why we spend, pretty much all our energy on Ethereum at this point.
And then what are your thoughts on Ethereum gas fees? I don't do much in Ethereum. I actually spend all of my time mostly in Solana. So where are we at with Ethereum gas fees these days? And when we went from proof of work to proof of stake, what was the impact of that?
Not so much on the gas fees. Like this transition wasn't about the gas fees. It was more about the environmental impact that that the Ethereum network was having on the world itself. Yeah. And so, there was some considerations for gas, but I wouldn't say there was any major like factor for doing so. I think the big unlock comes with, L2 scaling, right? That's when gas fees have become really cheap.
So when we start using Polygon and things like that.
Yeah. Well, not exactly Polygon. Polygon is like is a side chain. It's not an L2 itself.
Okay. Can you explain the difference?
So an L2, a proper L2 will roll back up into the main chain. Okay. Right. So that means what happens is that you can have a side chain. The side chain will have all these transactions, right? And those side chains get committed to the main chain with a verification that says all these transactions on that side chain are valid. Mm-hmm. An L2 such as Polygon has no reference to the main chain. Okay. Right. So it's strictly just the L2 portion of things running transactions.
Yeah. And are you a believer in these L2s?
I think that they're necessary for scaling. Okay. Right. So if in order for us to get past the high volume transactions to onboard the whole world, you have to have different chains. Okay.
And do you think that the environmental considerations around Bitcoin and then kind of the problem that Ethereum solved, are these valid concerns, or is it more just kind of FUD in the marketplace?
I'd say to the extent they are valid. I guess when you think about like proof of work, you're pretty much just throwing energy at a problem just to solve it for financial reasons. Right?
Boy, the maxis are going to be upset at you.
Yeah. Right. The other state is. The other kind of state, though, is that, I think the bigger concern is that it just creates an arms race for, computing power. Because, you can run the whole entire Bitcoin network on one computer if you really wanted to. Right. If that'd be the only one computer doing the work, right? Right. But it's because we have this, like, market competition of people trying to have, win the race, that you have, this exponential explosion of, power usage.
Yeah. Okay. I want to kind of end this on discussion around gaming. So you talked about kids and kind of their relationship with Roblox and all this kind of stuff. And we have kids similar in age. And my son, he'll do anything to play Roblox or whatever he's into at the moment. He'll sacrifice anything in his life to do that. And these kids, they're born, like you said, digitally native into this space. It's very easy for them to get involved. Do you see gaming as the first kind of mass market usage of Web3? And do you see that with children? Or maybe I'm kind of guiding the question here, or am I off base with this assumption?
Yeah, no, I think that, so the interesting thing is that if you hear what a bunch of teenagers are talking about these days, they're all talking about NFTs. And, I think that's just a natural segue to things because, what do? They also game. Right. And so you can actually think of the next generation of being this huge market that's just waiting to be unlocked. And so, I can see it happening, right? Yeah. To me, it's going to happen as long as the energy stays there. Yeah. And, I think that, given the current kind of state of things, it's like, just going to be inevitable.
Yeah. Are you, is Manifold involved in gaming at all?
We are not involved in gaming at all. That being said, though, a lot of our creators will actually do create assets for games.
Okay.
Right?
You're just not involved in that relationship with them?
Yeah, we are. So Manifold itself is, we're a tool for creators, right? And so we help with the aspect of creation of the NFTs itself, and sometimes distribution, but we have no qualms about, what you mint or how you mint it.
Right. Okay. And so kind of looking at Manifold, so am I understanding this correctly where if I'm a creator, I can work with Manifold and you guys will create a no-code smart contract, is that right?
Yep. So you can actually just go on the website itself, log in with your Ethereum wallet, and then deploy a smart contract and mint an NFT on that contract. You can do it all within 15 minutes.
And so I don't need to be technical in order to do that.
Yep. A lot of the artists we work with or that use our platform are not technical at all.
Right. I would imagine that almost no artists are technical and they might then employ a technical person. Would be the other option for them?
Yep. So a lot of artists have done that too, but that used to be the state of things before Manifold, but
Right.
now everyone says, yeah, just Manifold is like the way to go.
Were you guys the first to do that? The kind of the no code thing, or were you early in on that?
We're not the first to do it. We're the first to champion having your own sovereign smart contracts.
Okay.
So I would say, yeah, I think the big thing Manifold has done is that we championed having your own smart contract and made it really easy to deploy your own smart contracts.
Yeah. And so does that kind of go back to the heart of Web3, where we're trying to be decentralized and we're trying to be independent from central authority, and we're trying to kind of have control of our things, our assets, our lives. It's like you have gone to the heart of the value system, and created a product that helps artists kind of engage in that kind of freedom from the man, if you will. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, that was the whole premise of Manifold. It's like, we saw how things were being done, and just coming from a crypto background and just understanding, how it should be done. We're like, no, this should be done this way. And so we created Manifold pretty much to kind of further that mission.
What's the next step for Manifold?
I think it's more of the same. Our goal is always enable creators to have creative sovereignty over their works and everything, and really just enable them by creating more tools to enable creation of different types of NFTs.
Yeah.
And really just I think to me, the thing that excites me the most is that whenever we create something and a creator uses our tools and just blows our mind with something that we didn't even expect.
Right.
Right. So when I think about NFTs, a lot of creators out there are creating just images and videos. But now we're seeing creators create games and music players and just all these sort of things that, we didn't even expect.
Okay. I feel like I keep wanting to end this conversation, but then I don't, because I think of more interesting things. Okay. So what about music? Where does music come in here? Because so I'm a musician, not a good one. So I never made a career of it, but I see my musician friends, and it's really hard work. I've got friends that have hundreds of millions of listens on Spotify, and they make a humble living.
Yeah.
And you would think when you're performing in big theaters around the world and have hundreds of millions of listens, that you would be a wealthy person, but that's not the case. So where do we see music coming into the NFT space, and how does that play out?
Yeah. So, you see art, I say the musicians in the place, they're finding really good success with NFTs when they're selling direct to consumers, because they're able to create a consumer relationship with their fan base. Mm-hmm. Right. Music's kind of an interesting one, because it's music is generally free for the most part. And so what does it mean to own a song? Mm-hmm. We're actually seeing some interesting use cases around, not just owning a song, but owning the album itself. Right. And so, it's kind of remember back in the day, you could buy, right? I think it's still day. You can go on iTunes and just buy music. Right. Right. It'd be $1 for a song or $5 for an album. We're actually seeing a resurgence of that kind of model happen right now.
Interesting.
Right. So people are just buying, songs to support the artists they like for, $1 or $10 for an album.
Yeah. And so do you think, when is that in an NFT?
Yeah, as an NFT. Okay. And so,
what can I transport that into iTunes or something, or how do I actually listen to it?
That's the problem right now, is that, when I think about, when I was talking about standards and players back then, right, there is no kind of standardized player for NFT music content. And so people are creating their own players, but they're not interoperable with how you normally listen to music.
So I got to download some other app or go to a website to listen to that song.
But you can imagine in the future, right, is a version where you have something like Spotify that it actually plays NFT native content that creates that gives you a direct to artist relationship. And the reason why artists like this is that because it actually shows there's actually a history of who your earliest supporters are. right? So, when I listen to an artist on Spotify, they have no idea that I listen to them or I'm a supporter of them, right? If I were to buy their NFT and they're not a big artist yet, they're like, okay, these are my earliest supporters. I'm going to find a way to reward them or something like that.
And so when you say they know the early listeners, what you mean is they know your wallet address. Is that right?
There's a link to who you are on the blockchain, that you are an owner, and then actually, it's even dated too, right?
Oh, interesting.
So I am your first listener. I'm your first purchaser, right? That's a very meaningful thing to an artist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting. I've never heard of that or thought about that before. So that could be really powerful for artists to kind of reward those who have stuck with them all these years. And then they find out that, all the wallet addresses were their parents or something like that. And they'll be so disappointed and sad. So, okay, that's fascinating. Richard, this is such a dynamic conversation. I really appreciate you spending time with me. I think I've learned so much about this, and I think this is going to be really helpful for us, as we continue to kind of fight the battle to see more people get into Web3, and hopefully we have a better user experience as years come down the road. Thanks so much.
For sure. Thanks.